Three, two, one. This is Nick.
And this is Amanda.
And this is the Performance Plate Podcast, where we give you bite-sized bits of information based on nutrition and exercise science to improve your overall performance. Welcome back to the Performance Plate Podcast with Amanda and I. And today we have a very fun topic called leaky gut, which is a term that I actually did not understand for the longest time possible when I would hear it growing up at like 18 through the fitness world in my 20s. And then finally later on when I had my own symptoms of stomach stuff, I actually fully understood what leaky gut was.
What is your understanding of it? Or what was your understanding of it?
Was my understanding of it? So this is so all I kept thinking about when I would hear the terms leaky gut going through undergrad, going through graduate school, until I fully understood what it was, like deep into like physiology in grad school, and we started touching on nutrition. But when I'd hear it as like just a trainer that really didn't know as much when I was in my early 20s, I was like, oh, leaky gut. It just means your gut's leaking. So I just thought everybody that had leaky gut had diarrhea all the time. Because that's the only think about it. Something's leaking. I'm thinking of like a water faucet kind of.
No, it makes sense.
Leaking out. I'm like, man, that sucks. Like you're constantly leaking. Wow.
And makes sense.
Yeah. Well, then I started learning what it actually meant, and the bare basis of it, because there's so much to it. And I was like, oh, I mean, you could have diarrhea. Don't get me wrong. You could, but
yes, you could, or it could be the other way.
Yes, exactly. It's not entirely that case. I was like, oh, look at that. That's so odd. But you just hear a word leaky gut and you're like, well, they just got diarrhea all the time.
That's what it sounds like. It does. Right? It makes sense. Yeah.
It literally sounds like that. It's like, all right, this person's got the runs 24/7. Man, that sucks.
So, well, really, I mean, we're going to break it down today, what leaky gut is and why it is a hot topic and why it's important to know about. Mm-hmm. You could do a simple search on it and you would find research that dates back to probably like the 1970s. Mm-hmm. And they began researching it because with something like celiac or Crohn's disease, you're looking at the integrity of the gut lining of the gut mm-hmm. wall. Yeah. Because that's where you're seeing a lot of the issues arise. So it's always been it's been a research topic. It's well known in those mm-hmm. diseases, but it's become more popular, likely due to the increase in digestive symptoms that we're seeing without any real answers. So people mm-hmm. are seeing, lots of bloating, irregular bowels, mm-hmm. Fatigue, like all of these things that can be related back to the gut, and they're, without having celiac or Crohn's or something that is diagnosed, and they're like, okay, why is this happening? So I think that's part of the reason that it's been a hot topic. Yeah.
And for those that don't know, when you say gut, what do you mean specifically?
So we're talking about today we're going to talk a lot about the small intestine.
Yes.
But yeah.
That's what I wanted people to understand, that where we're going to focus on the small intestine, because your gut you hear gut and you just think abdomen area, most people, or like your belly. But it's kind of not so much as your stomach as you're thinking about. When people think digestion, most people think digestion, they think stomach.
Yeah. And, that's a really good point. Your entire GI system, it begins it doesn't, your entire system is not in your mouth, but it begins in your mouth.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Your mouth, you have your esophagus, you have your stomach, you have your small intestines, you have your accessory organs like your pancreas, mm-hmm. And you have your large intestine. Mm-hmm. And it's essentially this tube that runs through your body where food passes through and your body is pulling in the nutrients that it needs and mm-hmm. secreting what it needs into the intestines to help digest it and move it out. Whatever it doesn't need from the food that you're eating. So there's this really common saying, or it's becoming more common, you're not what you eat, you're what you absorb. Because
I love that. I've never heard that. That's amazing.
A lot of people have trouble with, not a lot of people, I shouldn't say that, but we're seeing an increase in people that have trouble with digesting their food and absorbing their nutrients, mm-hmm. which can lead to other issues if you're not actually retaining the nutrients from your food due to some sort of backup that's going on in your process.
Yeah. And I think something you just posted the other day, I think it was Monday, maybe Sunday, about 4 ways to improve digestion and all that is we take, like you said, it starts at your mouth, really. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
it does. And something to always notice is how much it starts at your mouth. Like, are you chewing your food enough? And I messaged
Hmm.
you. I was like, oh, right. I should probably chew my food. And I don't think,
Well,
go ahead.
even when you're smelling
Yeah.
food, there's actually enzymes that are being released.
Yes. Yeah. You start to salivate. So things will start breaking down in your mouth. Um,
Exactly. Your
and
body prepares for the food to come in.
well, that's the biggest part. You have to be prepared for the food. And not the biggest part, but that's one huge factor of it.
Hmm.
And like when I messaged you saying, "Oh, you should chew," that was like half joking, half not. I realized that I don't chew certain foods because they're easy to swallow as well as I should. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but then I noticed if I don't do that, I'm like, man, I feel so bloated today. I'm like,
Yeah.
that thing's sitting like a rock. And it's like, well, of course
Yeah.
it's sitting like a rock. Like, why wouldn't it?
The most underrated tool for better digestion and the cheapest is chewing.
Right. Boom. End the podcast there. Done. Just chew your damn food.
And we were given the tools to do that.
Like wild to think about that your teeth
Yeah.
and your mouth are supposed to do certain things like chew your food. Why
Yes.
would you do that? Oh man.
And even spending time like looking and smelling your food before eating it again can help secrete some of those enzymes, can help prepare your body for the food that's about to come in,
Yeah.
because you have first you start the digestive process in the mouth, both mechanically and chemically. Mechanically
Hmm.
meaning chewing, and then chemically meaning enzyme secretion, um, saliva, things that are going to help move the food down from the mouth through the esophagus into the stomach. And then in the stomach, you're seeing release of stomach acid and enzymes to help break down, again, food, mainly protein. And
Yep.
then moving more into the small intestine, where a majority of the digestion and most of the absorption happens.
Yep.
Um, and then anything that we don't need gets passed through the large intestine and then out to the body.
Yeah. And side note, my favorite word that involves digestion is peristalsis because it's just such
Mm,
a word. And all that means for people that don't know what peristalsis means, or I think it's peristalsis. What is I can't speak words sometimes. It just means that when you put food in the back of your mouth, it sends a wavelength of stuff, so it goes down your throat into your stomach and does all that fun stuff. But yeah, so that brings us into our leaky gut conversation, where you said in that small intestine, a lot of absorption has to happen. And supposedly, from reading in the articles, and like you said, it's a hot topic, is you're not absorbing as much as you should, or vice versa. It's actually going into your body, but not the way you think it's going into your body.
yeah. So what I think you're saying, or really what you're probably talking about, is the level of permeability happening in the small intestine. So it's a semi-permeable membrane.
Yep.
It's because you want to be able to absorb your food, but you
Hmm.
only want to be able to absorb the things you need. You don't want other things coming through there that you don't necessarily need, because anything that's your body recognizes as foreign, you're
Hmm.
going to have an immune response to it, hence the
Yeah.
inflammation.
Hmm.
Um, what leaky gut actually is a term for is hyperpermeability.
Hmm.
So seeing an increase in permeability at that gut lining, and I'll explain it as sometimes your gut cells line up against one another like this, like little soldiers, and they only
Yep.
allow certain things to pass through.
Yes. Yes.
And what happens in with leaky gut, quote unquote, is where they start to separate, and then
Hmm.
they're not, the junctions aren't as tight.
Yeah. Yeah, and permeability is that ability is just how much stuff is semi-permeable means things can transfer through. So if it's
Mm-hmm.
non-permeable, nothing can get through that system. That certain parts of our bodies are non-permeable. Semi-permeable, like Amanda's saying, is like little soldiers. I love that analogy. It's little soldiers next to each other, all lined up in a row, but they're movable. So they can open up a little bit to allow, let's say, calcium inside or something like that. But if they start separating, there's more space in there and they become more permeable, which means more open. And then other things, like Amanda said earlier, kind of can sneak in that aren't supposed to be there and can create
Mm-hmm.
some type of issue.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And again, you'll see this with really, many digestive diseases. But then again, the question becomes is like, why am I having these symptoms if I don't necessarily have celiac or Crohn's
Mm-hmm.
or something, or even IBS for that nature, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to start to think about, okay, well, how can I support my gut? or really, well, I mean, there, I guess what we really need to talk about is dysbiosis, like as I was talking about
Yes.
before we got on
Yeah.
here. There's three common dysbiosis patterns. Number one is insufficiency dysbiosis. So that's a lack or a decrease in certain beneficial bacteria. Second
Okay.
one would be inflammatory dysbiosis, which is an overgrowth of bad bacteria or bad bugs. And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
can be linked to a wide variety of conditions and diseases because they've started to link certain diseases and health statuses with certain overgrowth of some bacteria and
Yep.
having less of something and more of another one. And then the third one would be digestive dysfunction dysbiosis, which is associated with dysfunction in the digestive process. And it's, you would want to think about stomach acid secretion in your stomach, enzyme activity, bile acid activity, absorption, what's happening in the small intestine, how, efficient is your absorption, and
Yeah.
then any sort of like altered GI motility would probably all fall underneath that digestive dysfunction category.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
it's common to and it's common to see a combination of these things.
hmm
Now, with someone that maybe things aren't too severe, maybe they're just having some bloating, maybe they're just you know feeling like they're not fully digesting their food.
hmm
Um, you might think, okay, just a little bit of dysbiosis, right? How can I just support my good bacteria
Yeah.
and help suppress some of maybe the bad bacteria? Because it's like a chicken or the egg situation when it comes to bacteria and your mucous membrane or
hmm
your mucus lining of your gut.
Yeah.
Uh, the good bacteria helps produce and maintain that mucosal lining, where the
hmm
mucosal lining also helps maintain the good bacteria and keep the bad bacteria under control. So again,
Yeah.
it's a chicken or the egg situation. So you're kind of thinking about all these things in combination, like how can I support, um, all of those things. And
Yeah.
if we think like again, on the most basic level, if you're not chewing your food, your
Yes.
stomach has to do a much it has to do more work to
Yeah.
digest that food. So does
Yep.
your small intestine. Now you have undigested food, likely undigested food that's hanging out
hmm
in the small intestine, which undigested food can become food for. It can become food for good bacteria. We also don't want to see too much of certain ones,
Yep.
and also the bad bacteria too. And then we see this overgrowth happening or this dysbiosis, quote unquote. So chewing your food is so important. And also giving your
Yes.
body time to secrete your enzymes
Uh-huh. All right, I'll start chewing my food. Leave
and
me
your bile acid, right?
alone.
Like that's why it's so important. We need to give our
Yes.
body time to do these things,
hmm
because otherwise it has to work 10 times harder, and then we're likely seeing undigested food as well.
Yeah. Which is actually wild that we are grown up to learn that bacteria bad,
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get into like our level of knowledge base, and some people a little bit more so, and you're hearing more about like probiotics support the good bacteria in your gut. So like when you learn that, like, wait, there's good and bad bacteria in the gut, or there's bacteria in the gut in general, you're like, hold on, wait a second.
Yeah,
And
that
it's
sounds
actually
weird.
wild to think about. And I never knew like how intense it could be, but like when you go through certain populations of people that I'm in clinicals with, and they get this thing called C. diff, which is like a whole crazy thing because they were on so many NSAIDs that it killed all the bacteria, not even
Mm-hmm.
good and bad. So then your body just doesn't literally do anything. You just have this terrible overgrowth of C. diff, which is not good. And you
Right.
think about that for a second, like, wow, you want, it just shows how much homeostasis we need to be in. Like you
Yes.
said, good bacteria we need, but we also don't want too much good bacteria. We don't want bad bacteria, obviously, and we don't want too much bad bacteria. It's not ideal. Like we want to be just right, and no one's ever going to
Mm-hmm.
probably be perfect, but there's optimal ways to help us
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. Like we want that homeostasis balance between these things, and it's never like perfect doesn't exist, but
Mhm.
um, there's definitely optimal, and we can definitely there's definitely lifestyle factors,
Yeah.
and things that we can do from like a dietary and even a stress management and exercise standpoint that we can
hmm
do to help actually promote good bacteria,
Yeah.
and promote a balance in the gut too, because we need both, right? Like
Yeah.
it's normal to have both.
Well,
Um,
let's go into that whole thing when you talk about exercise, stress management, and how to help that. Because some of the articles we were reading before the podcast episode was talking about how actually high levels of exercise to like the nth degree, and I don't remember all the percentages, but one of them was it stood out to me that 80% of like total exercise, pushing yourself to 80% of your like maxes and stuff can actually cause a disruption in your microbiomes of the gut. And I was like, what? But it
Yeah.
kind of like it shows how, don't get me wrong, we're not saying don't push yourself, but when people talk about, oh, I got to take all these supplements and that will help me. And there's maybe some truth to that, but there's also, you got to make sure your diet's on point realistically because of when you're pushing yourself to that level, how it can actually affect your microbiome and your digestion without even realizing, because you're just like, no, I'm exercise. You don't think of one and the same. You think
Right.
exercise, build muscle, get stronger, get faster, get more specific at my sport or whatever it is. And reading the articles, it's like, well, it could also affect your gut. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Why? Why would you do this? It's good for me.
Yes. Yeah. And like that's why or it's likely why it's seen so commonly in athletes
Mm-hmm.
and people that train, and people that are like, oh wow, like why am I so bloated all the time? Like I eat so healthy and I
Yeah.
train and I do all the things that I'm supposed to be doing, but now like my gut's a mess. Why is my gut a mess?
Mm-hmm.
And they're it's really like a growing area of research as to why this is. And again, I think it's a little bit of like a chicken or the egg situation. That inflammation, the release of your corticosteroids specifically too, like what's happening on that microbe level, and
Mm-hmm.
how is like some of that influencing the bacterial balance in your gut and vice versa.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that's training and you're like, hey, I have all of these problems. What can I do about it? Well, again, starting with just by like slowing down when you eat
Mm-hmm.
and like athletes, right? You think prone to more sympathetic activity, prone to a go, go, go kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, so exactly. So I love that statement because sympathetic. So we should talk about how parasympathetic and um, sympathetic nervous system work real quick.
Yes.
Just very basic of that. Parasympathetic, rest, digestion.
Yes.
Sympathetic is go, go, go. I'm training for something. That's our olden mindset of like, we're running away from a saber-toothed tigers. We don't want to get eaten.
Mm-hmm.
So remember last week I talked to you about, hey, and this is why this is such a good, fun topic to talk about, because I guess leading up to it without even realizing it, I just kept giving you stuff to feed off of. Last week, remember I messaged you like, hey, can I start taking, well, I forget what it was, the psyllium husks
Oh,
to help
so
with
husk. Yeah.
bloating, digestion, stuff like that, because I'm not having my morning coffee. All these things compounded into it. And then I sat back for a second and realized, because you asked me a million questions, and it made me realize though, also, I think it was Friday I messaged you or Thursday I messaged you, whatever day it was. Probably, I think it was Friday. And Wednesday, I re-aggravated my back from misgrooving a deadlift. So my CNS, my central nervous system, but the sympathetic part of it was through the roof because I was trying to heal. And I was like, and I remember I texted my friend. I was like, I feel so like jittery lately for the past 2 days. And she's like, remember, you just aggravated something. You've been going and your sympathetic nervous system is through the roof. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh crap, maybe that's why I feel so bloated. Maybe that's why my digestion's off. Maybe I don't need all these supplements right now. It's just I need to meditate, calm down, and really breathe to try and bring my parasympathetic nervous system up more.
Definitely.
So,
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's so interesting too, because I mean, you think about when you get a poor night's sleep
mhm.
or you go on an airplane and your
Yeah,
body's experiencing all of this stress. And
yeah,
you don't think about it like, I mean, maybe people don't think about an airplane, but actually flying is pretty stressful on your body going up that high in the air.
yeah,
And a lot of people get bloated on planes or they
mhm.
can't go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
You can start to piece it together probably in your own life. You're probably going right now, okay, hey, oh, wow, you're right. When I am stressed, like
yeah, yeah.
I I do get more bloated when I have an exam coming up, or
Mhm.
I get more acid reflux when I eat fast because I'm stressed about running to the next thing. Like you can start to see how these two things are so interconnected.
Mhm.
And it's likely one of the big reasons that a lot of people are seeing a rise in digestive issues.
Yeah.
Not just because of the food that we're eating, but also because of our lifestyle. Like we
Yep.
want to go and blame the food. And yes, of course, we can go on a whole
Rant
tangent
with
about
that.
that too,
Of
but
course.
yeah, you got to think about the parasympathetic to sympathetic balance in your life because,
Hmm.
as you said before, I mean, everyone, if anyone that goes into any sort of like health degree, you learn parasympathetic is rest and digest. That's where your
Yep.
digestive system is optimal. That's where it's highly functioning in that system, and that's why when we eat, we want to calm down first and tap into that system,
Hmm.
so that thing we're calm and we're able to secrete the enzymes we need to secrete. We're able to secrete our stomach acid. We're able to fully digest our food, or we're able to optimally digest our food.
Yeah.
Um, versus if we're trying to do it in a sympathetic state, our body's not worried about digesting food. Our body's worried about staying alive.
Yes.
And if
Yes.
we if
You're right.
we have a lot of our threats are what's the word I'm looking for? Um, hypothetical threats.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
we're eating, but we're thinking about, oh my God, what if I fail that exam that I'm studying for? Oh
Yeah.
my God, I have to do this for work. Oh my God, I don't have time to do all these things. Your body's like, oh, we got to survive. We got to survive. Release the cortisol, release the cortisol. Don't forget about digestion. We don't need to fully
Yeah.
digest our food. It's not that big of a deal, right? Well, that
Hmm.
happens time and time and time and time again. It becomes a big deal and it becomes a big issue. And
Yeah.
now we see maldigestion and absorption of nutrients. We see overgrowth of bacteria. We see all the symptoms that come with that. And
Mhm.
then we think about it even in like, you could go, there's a really big correlation between the gut and autoimmunity. And if
Yeah.
that goes ignored for long enough, essentially that can lead to autoimmunity. And that's a
Mhm.
really big, um, you know, that's another
A big
important
issue.
conversation as well. Yeah, it's a big issue, of
Yeah.
course,
Well, and
because yeah,
we have to remember that there's something to be said about that. Like, and we're like Amanda and I said, we're not saying do not train aggressively. You're allowed to. Just remember then other factors, and we've talked about this multiple times on many other episodes. Other things have to be not, I mean, no one's perfect. We're not perfect. Like I just said, I'm freaking out over my digestion, but I forgot that sympathetic nervous system was through the roof because I was like, oh, I kind of aggravated my back a little bit, like, so we have to remember that there's certain things where you can help yourself. Don't do yourself a disservice where if you know and you'll hear this, why the top tier athletes, NFL players, basketball players, pro athletes that are actually on the professional level, they prioritize their sleep. And people are like, oh, like they're not out until 2 a.m. because them sleeping a lot helps their parasympathetic nervous system kick in. Them with they have nutritionists, their diets. I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone has these cravings for different things and whatever it is, but their diets are pretty well maintained to help mitigate all the stuff that they're doing to their body as best they can. Because you're never going to be able to be in perfect balance where it's like, okay, if I train for 1 hour a day at 80% of my highest max heart rate and all of this, and I sleep for 9 hours plus eat these foods, they'll net negative effect on my body. That's just not possible.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's my favorite example too, is what would a pro athlete do? They
Mm-hmm.
would sleep, they would
Yep.
focus on recovery, they would eat enough food, they would drink enough water. They
Yeah,
wouldn't be like spreading themselves
it's true.
these things. You can survive with these symptoms with GI related and be connected back to the gut. Um, you can survive for a pretty long time.
Mm-hmm.
Optimize training and performance and how you're feeling. And also, again, I think a lot, because even for our listeners, like a lot of them have aesthetic goals.
Mm-hmm.
If you want your optimal aesthetic goals, you better be taking care of your gut.
Oh my gosh. So,
Yeah,
quick side rant on that. So, remember you were saying how it may not affect you right away in the short term, but you can go a while without taking care of
yeah.
yourself. And
And actually,
go ahead.
I was going to rephrase that too, but you go first.
So, well, I was just going to tell the quick story of I don't know, most of the listeners may not know my like issues with stomach stuff. And occasionally I'll message you when we're like, wait, what's going on with your stomach? And I was like, no, it's fine, it's fine. Because a lot of mine is also the psychological aspect of it, which is a whole nother story in itself. We can do a whole podcast on the mind and gut connection because there's a whole book I read on it and it's amazing. However, part of that is, so I was a competitive bodybuilder for years all throughout grad school. So I was working out to the highest ability I could, plus going through graduate school, two huge stressors on my body. Also, my diet was decent in the sense of for bodybuilding, it was good, but it wasn't like it is now with colorful palettes of food, all this stuff. And then randomly, I don't forget the year it was, maybe 2018, just randomly one day ate a slice of pizza. And no, it was a calzone and instant stabbing pain in my stomach. Never went away. Tried everything under the sun. I just stopped eating. I started eating rice packets a day because that's one rice packet a day, like the Uncle Ben's rice packet. So it was like 200 calories. Just completely stopped. I was like, no, I don't want to deal with this anymore. My stomach was upset all the time. I constant pain, constant bloating, no matter what I did. I was like, I'm done. Got all the tests done possible, endoscopy, colonoscopy, all this stuff. And so just it felt, and eventually now I'm fine and everything's better, but it took a while to fix that. But like Amanda said, years of me neglecting my gut and just being like, oh, I'm stressed, or my family has gut issues, so I'm just supposed to have gut issues. Like my mom says she's like, oh, I've had irritable bowel my whole life. So I'm like, oh, I'm just supposed to have this. I have a sensitive stomach, which is not true at all. I just was not taking care of myself.
That's so good. I hope everyone listens to that part. I'm curious too, when you were healing, what did you do? What were some of the core things you did to help?
So I didn't even finish the part. That brings me to the aesthetics part. So I went to a nutritionist and she did something called a LEAP test. It's a food sensitivity test. It seemed to work wonders. I know there's research on it against it. It worked really well for me, so I was all for it. Like it worked 100%. I felt best. There was a point where I saw her because I was gaining my weight back, which I was down to like 120 pounds again, and I'm normally around 160. So I lost a lot of weight. And even when my patients were like, that shirt used to be tight on you. And I was like, shoot, that's when I realized like, okay, this is a problem. As I started gaining my weight back, I also remember walking into her office and was like, I just want you to know that I feel amazing. I've never slept better in my life. I feel the best I've ever felt. Also, not that you care, but like, I feel like I could step on stage today. And she's like, what does that mean? I was like, I'm shredded. She's like, huh? And I was like, no, seriously, because as I was fueling myself appropriately and exercising, my body was allowed to build the muscle, build what it needed to. And I was like, wow, like physique goals can happen just by taking care of your gut even more so than exercising. Because I was not exercising aggressively because I wasn't allowed to. Because we were so worried about gaining weight that I was not allowed to like do more than 30 minutes of exercise. And it wasn't allowed to be hit. It was basic stuff. You know what I mean? Like quick strength training most of my day. And I was like, man, look at me. Like I look good. So like you said with physique goals, that's something to actually think about. Like make sure if you have a physique goal, your gut is on point.
Definitely. And the thing that I was going to rephrase was you could win a bodybuilding competition without having optimal gut health, especially if it's like your first one and you don't have any other issues going on.
Yeah.
But if you want to sustain those results, and again, like a lot of people that we see and work with, like their lifestyle clients or their athletes that want to just sustain a good body composition, you got to think about your gut health long term.
Yeah, you have to.
That's really interesting though. The food sensitivity test. So did you cut out things that she had recommended, and that was what?
So I got a whole list of stuff, like a whole list of foods beyond belief. And then you start with very basic foods that like your body seems least reactive to, and you do that for a month. Then after that, you take a step up to a little bit more reactive, very minimal reactive, and you do that for a month. And then after that,
gradual food reintroduction.
Exactly. And then every single time after that, you do one food a day. No, one food it was 2 foods a week of more reactive, just to see how things react to your body. And the whole goal is to be able to eat everything again. And I can eat everything again. It's just certain foods I know I don't process as well, and they seem to bother me. Like the first time I ate avocado, I was like,
Mhm.
that's it. I thought I died again. Literally thought I sent back to the beginning of my diet. And then I also did not introduce it slow enough. I just ate a whole thing of avocado.
Mhm.
Bad idea. But now I can eat almost anything. It's just certain foods I know I can't eat excess of. And that's normal. Certain
Yeah.
foods people don't tolerate well. That's just it. That's your body.
What foods don't you, I mean, you don't have to share actually if you don't want. I'm just curious if there's like a certain food group or something that you don't tolerate well.
Corn,
Uh-huh.
peas,
Yeah.
and too much avocado.
So were there other things that changed in your life outside of reintroducing that food in? Like were there other like
I quit my job. I moved to Maryland and chose a different job, which was more stressful. Don't get me wrong, but that was part of it.
uh-huh.
But like my training changed. I was not pushing myself as hard as I could anymore.
Hmm.
So like without knowing that training aggressively can cause some issues, I didn't know that, and we just fixed some things. So indirectly, that actually took an effect without knowing it. Uh,
Yeah.
like I said, I was only when I started with the diet because we weren't even worried about like the sympathetic part of it, like we were talking about me and you. We were just worried about if I burn too many calories in the day, I'm going to lose more weight, and I'm not going to gain weight because there's only
Hmm.
so much food I could eat before I was like, especially when you're have such a limited palette of food or like availability, there's only so much I could eat. And I was like, I can't eat anymore. So she was like, well,
Yeah.
you can't burn as much. I was like, okay, that's easy enough. I just won't work out as long. Uh,
Yes.
that and then another factor was, understanding what I'm eating. And I think a lot of us have to really look what we're eating. you know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what
of course.
and reading food labels, huge, huge on that is because I want to make sure what I'm eating is what it says I'm supposed to be eating.
Hmm.
And I remember that I tell everyone the story. I remember I was looking at garlic powder in my parents' house, and I was like, "Oh wow, why is there soy? There was soy something in the garlic powder. I guess as a preservative." And I was like, "What the hell is that doing in garlic? This should just be garlic powder." Like
Uh-huh.
it got me so angry. I was like, "What the heck is this? Why is this in here?"
Yeah.
And my mom's like, "Why are you so mad?" I was like, "I don't know why I'm so mad, but I just wanted to use garlic powder, but at that time I couldn't have soy, and I was just like frustrated."
Yeah. Well, it is frustrating because it's not like it was really taught.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not. So to bring it just so people understand, what are some signs, just so because we kind of touched on them, but let's summarize some of the signs of maybe leaky gut or dysbiosis, but what are some signs that you're noticing that you should be aware of? Not just one time, like I said when I messaged you, like, hey, like the advantage is we talk all the time, so I will just message you. But like if you're the average person that doesn't have access to someone like me or you all the time, what are some signs and things you want to look at where you should, and how long should these be things going on before you're like, wait a second, something may be off here? What would you say?
If it's like a one-off thing, you might be able to relate it back to like something that recently happened, like your
Mhm.
situation, or you know, just food that you ate that didn't sit well. But if it's consistently happening, well, really what you're looking for is 1 to 4, 3 or 4 bowel movements a day, well
Mhm.
formed, like 3 or 4 on a Bristol stool chart. If you know what a Bristol stool chart is, if you don't know
Yeah.
what one is, look it up, and then you can compare
Hmm.
on there. Your stool should sink; it shouldn't float.
Yes.
You want to look for it can be a sign of undigested food. Any increase in gas, especially like smelly gas, not
Hmm.
really that can be a sign of dysbiosis. Some gas is obviously normal, but just and a really large increase in it or very frequent. And
Hmm.
then especially if it's like super smelly, if you're really bloated all the time, and especially if it's painful bloating. Um, if you are getting any sort of indigestion,
Hmm.
heartburn, discomfort, you just feel like you're not fully digesting your food,
Hmm.
or even fatigue. That fatigue is a really big one.
And
So that
fatigue with throughout the day or fatigue after eating?
fatigue after eating throughout the day,
Okay.
crashes throughout the day.
Hmm.
Uh, there's so many things.
I
So
know.
many things. Yeah.
There is a lot, but we'll try and give like people basic stuff to kind of notice because what you want to notice, like Amanda said, is one-off things,
Yeah.
whatever. You want to notice anything in nutrition, even like with working out, exercising, anything with that as an athlete, you want to notice trends, you
Yeah.
know?
another big one is too, if you have an inability to tolerance a wide variety of foods without having an actual diagnosed allergy.
Mm-hmm.
So some
Yeah.
people will get tested for like a lactose, allergy,
Yeah.
or not glucose, gluten, but it
Yeah.
doesn't come back, but they're still intolerant to some of those foods.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would, probably be a case like yours where you're actually able to add those back in over time once the integrity of the gut is there.
Yeah. Nice. So more or less what we're saying here too is, like we said, you want to notice trends in your stuff. You want to notice like, hey, if you're exercising, if you're a high level athlete or weekend warrior or whatever you are, trying to be with your exercise routine, remember that it actually does affect your gut. You may not
Mm-hmm.
think it all the time because when we are very compartmentalized in certain things, like I'm here at the gym to train my muscles and get stronger for this sport. I'm at the track to run 40 sprints because that's what I need to do so I can get faster. But you don't always correlate that with maybe that's why my stomach can be upset, or maybe that's why I have these symptoms going on, because it can affect your mind. Like the articles we were reading, it was like mind blowing to me. I was like, right, that makes sense. It makes sense, but like you have to hear it to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't
Definitely.
think of it right away because the act of actually you're not inside your body looking at your gut and like, all right, this is pretty cool. Like,
I wish we could. How cool
well,
would that be?
it would be mind blowing. But like you're not in there and be like, oh, look, the good bacteria in my
Oh,
gut is actually like getting eaten up more because I'm straining my body so much. You're not looking at that. You can't see that physically happen. The only thing you have, and that's why I'm saying this, is because the only thing you have is noticing trends of things going on. If you
mm-hmm.
notice you're in a peak of training, you have 8 weeks till your competition, whether it's a marathon, whether it's powerlifting, bodybuilding, and your digestion is way off point and you're noticing bloating every single time, all these things. Now with bodybuilding, it's a little bit different because you can only eat certain amounts of foods, but you can then, that's where supplementation may be a benefit in that aspect, getting the right guidance, not just start taking random things,
Mm-hmm.
may help you. You want to start noticing trends of what's going on to help you with quote unquote leaky gut or this dysbiosis that you actually have. And then if it's persistent and crazy, you should really actually see like someone like Amanda to get help for understanding what's going on with your body.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yes.
I feel
Agreed.
like I just, this conversation is amazing. And a lot of it, I've experienced a lot of it without realizing. And that's where reading the articles, I was like, wow, damn.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's cool to put the
Well,
pieces together.
yeah. And it's true. Like, and I hope that anybody listening to this kind of starts looking at, you know, I realize that every single time I've been strength training more aggressively. I've been doing F45. I've been doing Orange Theory. I've been doing these classes. And I've been feeling my guts even worse now. And I never noticed
Mm-hmm.
it before. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe you're not absorbing it well. Maybe there's something to note of. Like, notice those trends. Make sure that you're taking care of your gut, you're absorbing things. Because once you start feeling optimal, and I tell everybody, I never felt better when I took care of my health like that. I literally felt like $1,000,000.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like if you wanted me to run a marathon, I was like, I could do it tomorrow. And that's just, it was amazing. So you never know how good you can feel until you feel it. And then you'll always
Yes.
want to feel that way.
Yes.
It's true.
Absolutely. No, that's the truth.
That's the facts of it.
Yeah.
So awesome conversation today, Amanda. We have so many other things we can dive into, and we'll make spin-off ones of this leaky gut stuff. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please rate us. Please let us know what you think. If you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment, leave a like, and share and tell your friends. And as always, Amanda, thank you. It's been a blast. And until next time.
Thanks, Nick.